Welcome to POV, Planning and Organizational Visioning, bringing you insights from experts in planning, sustainability, and organizational management. I'm your host, James Rouse. On this episode of POV, we have Leonardo Vazquez. Leo is a national award-winning urban planner, author, and educator who specializes in community economic development, creative placemaking, culturally competent planning, leadership development, and strategic communications. He is the founding executive director of the National Consortium for Creative Placemaking in Union, New Jersey. It helps grow and professionalize the emerging field of creative placemaking through leadership development, coaching, and summits. He is also director of creative placemaking at New England College, where he directs the Executive Education Certificate in Creative Placemaking. He was a professor at Rutgers University's Bloustein School of Planning and Public Policy and Ohio State's Knowlton School of Architecture. He is the author of Leading from the Middle, Strategic Thinking for Urban Planning and Community Development Professionals, and Dialogos Placemaking in Latino Communities. Leo is also co-founder of the Ethnic and Cultural Diversity Committee, now known as the Diversity Committee for the American Planning Association New York Metro Chapter. Thank you for joining us today, Leo.
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me, James.
Yeah. So, you're a planner who lives in Maplewood, New Jersey, and works in creative placemaking and with arts organizations. Did you see yourself doing this as a career 30 years ago?
Well, 30 years ago, I didn't even know that planning existed.
Like many of us.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think back. Probably 30 years ago, I was in college, and it actually was the beginning of my career in social justice. I didn't know it at the time. At the time, I thought I was becoming a journalist. But what happened was I was interning for the Times, and I remember I was in the real estate section because I was into cities. And I remember being asked to write if you're thinking of living in column, which is the living in.
Yes. And
the first place I thought of was Stapleton in Staten Island.
Sure.
Now, Stapleton was a neighborhood. I'm sorry, not Stapleton, Rosebank. Rosebank in Staten Island. Now, Rosebank was a neighborhood that, at the time, it was a really strong old Italian neighborhood. And whether it's true or not, everybody thought it was true. Basically, if you were black, you couldn't even walk down the street there.
Yeah, there were many neighborhoods back in the day, Arthur Avenue, Bensonhurst, where, you had to be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. So this probably wasn't the most ethical thing for me as a young journalist, but I thought I could use the influence of the Times to write about Rosebank and get people who were a little more open-minded to move there. But that really started me on the idea of how I could leverage the influence of other institutions, of other people, to guide, to have societal change. And so I worked as a journalist for 5 years, and I kind of followed in the footsteps of my heroes Jane Jacobs and Frederick Law Olmsted, sure, and other and Holly White, by moving from writing about urban issues to actually working on them. So as a planner, I went to USC to study as a planner, and I'll tell you, being a journalist is probably one of the best prerequisites for being a planner, because both planners and journalists have to think about balance.
Sure.
A journalist should have a balanced view and story and try to get multiple sides, and a planner, of course, is trying to find balance among many perspectives. But in my work in planning, I've always thought about how do we not only diversify the profession, but how do we help the profession work better in diverse and dynamic conditions. One of the things that struck me as a young planner was seeing how white the profession was, and it surprised, and I didn't think it was racism in the traditional sense, because all the planners I'd met were people not only who were generally nice people, but also were cared about diversity, but yet sure, we weren't getting our numbers weren't reflective. You could say, well, graduate programs, etc., but social work was much more, the social work profession was much more diverse than planning. And so when I came here, back to New York from LA, I was working with a community development corporation, and I worked with a consulting firm, and Mitch Silver, who is now the Parks Commissioner. I guess I should call him Commissioner Silver, although he's always Mitch to me. So.
Yeah, I call him Mitch as well.
Yeah,
Mitch, if you're listening, it's out of love.
Yeah, yeah. So he asked me to kind of restart this organization, this committee that had been called the African Americans and Latinos in Planning, and I thought, well, that's nice. What about Asian Americans? What about South Asian Americans? Well, we can't have a committee called African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, mixed race, So let's just call it Planners for Ethnic and Cultural Diversity. And then, we got started there and done some good things. I think, doing some research and also did events and just kind of bring up the issues. But one of the things that I did find a little frustrating, though, with the diversity work, at least when I was doing it, is that I felt like a lot of times I was preaching to the choir. And I was lucky enough to be able to speak at the New York Metro chapter conferences and other areas. But I felt like I was speaking to the same 10 people or 15 people. Sure. And those were the people who got it. Those were the people who didn't listen. So I realized I needed to do something different if I was going to have some significant influence in the planning field. I got into training planners and developing leadership programs because I realized it's not a problem of sensitivity. I think planners generally are good people, sensitive people, they care, but our profession is one that encourages us to focus on maintaining order.
Sure.
Because we think about what are we paid to do?
Yeah.
We're brought in when people are afraid of something chaotic happening, or that is happening, or may happen, that there's change that they don't know what to do with, and we're brought in to present some kind of orderly future, some plan for an orderly future. I mean, when everything is going fine, nobody wants the planners
exactly
around.
Yeah. Like, we're the ones who kind of lay the guidelines, but at the same time we're historically a very passive, intrinsically valued profession, and sometimes that keeps us quiet or in the background from what we need to achieve and what we need to do.
Yeah, we're kind of like beige wallpaper. We're pleasant and easy to ignore.
Yeah.
But so I realized it wasn't a management issue. Planners are good at managing things. They're good at managing processes. It was really more of a leadership issue of how do you work with people? How do you deal with chaos, with the disorder that, and when I say disorder, I mean dis-order, not disorder in medical sense, but the disorder that happens when you have more creativity, more diversity, more complexity, breeds more chaos. And so I developed the Leading from the Middle program, which, James, you are a graduate of.
Full disclosure, Leo is a mentor and friend of mine that I got to know through what was known as the Pew Partnership Leadership Plenty model that I helped Leo evolve afterwards into Leading from the Middle. And it was a great opportunity and experience that I'm forever in my debt to Leo. But moving along.
Great. And thank you, James. And I've used it. I live it. And the fact that I've been able to grow a nonprofit organization just in the last 2 years by over 600% in top line revenue, I think part of it represents some of the success of this. But so going back to the diversity work, well, I was doing training for planners, doing leadership development. Still wasn't enough. I mean, I was still getting the planners and maybe influencing some, and certainly I think empowering some planners who really wanted this and had a new language. But in terms of having an impact in the profession as a whole, it was still not enough, or I felt it wasn't enough. So about 10 years ago, when I was at Rutgers, I was asked to develop a program or a course on arts and planning.
Sure.
And I'll tell you, like most planners, I thought, oh, isn't that nice? Arts, oh, art's the fun stuff. Oh, murals and, painting street corners. Oh, it's cute. Of course, it's not the serious stuff like, roads, blah, 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 I mean, I was thinking like most planners think about that stuff. But as I really got into it and learned more about it and opened my mind to it, I found that the arts have incredible potential for community and economic development. One I saw was that you could get things done with the arts in a short amount of time, in weeks and months, versus having to wait years for a new park, new road, housing development.
Brings people together, and it's a sense of visualization, which is important for a lot of people.
Right. The community building, the helping to build that better civil society, the art making as a way to get people to be in a room, be in the same place, kind of be in a similar, not a similar mindset, but at least having more of a feeling of trust that you don't get in your traditional means. Now, those were all great by themselves. But what I also learned is that the arts and engaging artists in our planning work also can influence how planners think about their work and what planners do. Because the thing about artists is artists are, by their nature, tend to be more risk tolerant.
Sure.
In terms of problem solving, it's the approach that professional artists, the people who have, and by that I mean people who have surfaced their creativity, that the approach they take to problem solving is not the kind of the linear approach that most planners take, that we were taught, the rational comprehensive planning model, but rather more of a circular approach. Let's try something, see if it works, and then
more holistic.
Yeah, exactly. And thinking about, we're holistic in different ways, because planners are holistic. What I think the difference is that we as planners are trained to think in nouns, and artists tend to work more in adjectives.
Oh, interesting.
Express those.
Interesting way to say it.
And that's how most people actually, when you ask them about a place, they describe their place in terms of adjectives rather than nouns. So, in terms of influencing planners, I thought this could really be, this creative placemaking stuff could be more than just about the product. So what we're talking about with creative placemaking is not just City Beautiful 2.0, but rather something that could have pretty significant impact in how we do our work. And this gets into, and you can read about this in our organization at cpcommunities.org, but there's something new that I've been toying with or been expressing to a few people about, that I hope will have an influence in the planning profession, or how planners think. So most of us have been trained in two ways of thinking as planners. The prescriptive model, which is the design. We know the future, we're going to design the future. And the proscriptive model, which is, oh my God, people are going to do terrible things, so we have to write rules that say, you can't do this.
The finger in the dam.
Right, exactly. So, both have value, but the prescriptive model makes us sort of arrogant, and the proscriptive model makes us really insecure.
Yeah.
So a model that I'm looking to explore, that I'm hoping to develop in more detail, is what I'm calling an adaptive model. Something where we as planners can work through some basic values, basic principles, but that we can adapt, be more flexible about our work, about what gets done. And there are models of this type of planning out there.
Sure.
Form-based codes, which focuses on which is a departure from use standards, tactical urbanism, which about pilot projects, and certainly creative placemaking, where it's about art